How you think about money can influence how you save and spend and ultimately impact your financial success. Now, we have all a so called money mindset, even high net worth individuals. Luke Hale and Zach Horn, advisors at Foster Motley, are with me, Patrice Sikora. And gentlemen, you have the pleasure of working with smart, successful clients with different backgrounds and different money mindsets. Zach, why don't you talk more about this mindset idea and why it matters even for people with significant assets?
Sure. Thank you, Patrice. It's a pleasure to be here. And this topic, I think it's a fun one. All right. We all have our thoughts and feelings about money, and it's not just about the numbers. There's a lot of emotion there that goes into it. How we think about money, how we think about our earning potential, saving versus spending, what we're spending on. All of those decisions are decisions that we all have to make. And a money mindset is just how someone thinks about wealth, how they think about money. And there's a lot that goes into each individual's money mindset. It can come from your upbringing, how your parents perceived wealth and their financial status, and how you were taught to utilize money, and then influences you have along the way, your education, friends, society in general, where you live. All of these sorts of things play into every person's money mindset. And there are different, call it categories of money mindsets, different types that we tend to see. And Luke and I have the pleasure of working with wonderful clients, as you mentioned, successful clients, and we get to see clients that have done it a lot of different ways. They found success with different approaches to money, and we tried to help think through all of the decisions that they are going to make with not just the numbers, but understanding how they feel and think about money, what their goals are, ultimately what their money mindset is. So we got to play a little bit of psychologist along the way too.
Luke, talk about these different mindsets that Zach mentioned.
This is one of my favorite things to work through when we meet a new client. There are some academic kind of mindsets that are developed. We've got the a growth oriented person that wants to always see their assets grow and have a little more. Then we've got ultra conservative people that really just don't want to see any variation in the value of their assets. Makes them very nervous to have anything less than what they had the day before. And we've got people that build wealth generationally. So when they think about money, they think about their kids, they think about their longer term, maybe charitable interests. And then we've got lifestyle maximizers, which are a blast to work with. They say, "How much can I spend? Uh, what I've got left, the kids can have, but I'm not going to focus on that. So show me what I can do, and life is short, and let's go do it." So the fun part about this is, as Zach mentioned, I think much of it is formed when you're a young person. And I've actually read some studies that whatever was going on in your house when you were 13 years old will largely define your money mindset. So if you were in a house where, resources were scarce, your mom and dad lost their job, something like that, it's going to affect the way you feel about money, because at that point you're kind of having the start of an adult awakening around what money can mean and what money, can do. Uh, Alternatively, if you've been in a household where money was never a big issue, nobody really focused on it, things were always very comfortable, then you're likely to be much less focused on money and much less focused on anxiety around money.
That sounds really great, but they say opposites attract. So, what happens when you get two spouses with different money mindsets?
It's really interesting because when you have two spouses with similar mindsets, things work pretty nicely. And there's not a lot of conflict, but I would say 75% of our clients are different. So opposites may attract, and you really don't express your money mindset often when you're dating somebody. So oftentimes it's found out a little bit later, and it can cause some friction. So I think what an advisor can do, and what we like to do, is really figure out what is important to each individual spouse and understand if they're scared about money, where's that coming from? And a lot of times just verbalizing that, like the idea that your money mindset was formed when you were 13, it can be very freeing for a client because they've never thought about that. And their spouse has almost never, ever heard about this kind of thing. They just, they have some sense of how things were when you were growing up, but they don't think about it in relation to money.
Luke, I'll add that you're right on that. There's oftentimes differences. We see it right at the beginning of relationships with clients when we are asking about risk tolerance for investing. So, as an investment advisor, I'm talking through my clients and trying to figure out not only what type of risk do they need to take in terms of investing in stocks to grow their wealth, but what type of risk can they handle? Can they stomach? Because you got to be able to stay the course during tough times. And so oftentimes we'll see a risk tolerance score that comes back for spouses that's quite different because maybe one is more aggressive and one is much more conservative. I will say to some extent there's some checks and balances there where maybe the conservative approach helps temper the aggressiveness that one would have, but ultimately we have to work through what is the best mix of investments for both money mindsets, for both spouses, and for their long-term goals. We also try to take that approach that here's where you're at financially, here's where you want to get, and how can we help you best get there based on the risk you're willing to take or not. So part of it falls back to that. So when we think through the growth oriented investor, the ultra conservative protector, the generational wealth builder, the lifestyle maximizer, as Luke pointed out, four ways to think about money mindsets, we certainly try to engage with our clients, with an understanding of which bucket they may fall in, and then help them enhance, some of the decisions they make, understanding that they've got preconceived notions, maybe one way or the other. So that's that's certainly an approach that's helpful with working with an advisor and a third party, especially when there's two spouses that are maybe have differing mindsets, differing opinions.
Do you have any stories where they've come together or not?
It's a good question. I think they usually always come together, but the friction point can be high or low. So you may have a perpetual friction point because you just can't change who you are. Now you can realize who you are and you can realize who your spouse is and you can kind of play to the middle. And that's what we see a lot of times with people that have very different opinions on the spectrum. They will work through it and come up with a compromise. Now, be that a compromise in asset allocation, how Zach invest the money, or a compromise on if they're going to spend X amount of money on a new car or a second home or things like that. One person maybe feels very conservatively, and the second home is a total waste of money, and it's going to be a drain on our time. And the other person is very excited about it. So I think you oftentimes come to compromises, as you often do in relationships.
Yeah, Luke. So we have the pleasure, as I mentioned before, of playing psychologist a little bit. And as I mentioned, there's psychology to finance, maybe a little bit of psychology, just human psychology and dealing with people. But the psychology behind financial decisions, often referred to as behavioral finance, is very important. There's an emotional side to wealth. And we work with clients that have earned their money through blood, sweat, and tears over their life and maybe have a fear of losing it. So despite abundance, despite having a lot of wealth, they may still be fearful of what could be in a worst case scenario, and that prevents them from using that wealth to make the most of their life, to take that once in a lifetime vacation, or whatever the expense may be that can help enhance their emotional well-being, their life. Sometimes there's just the fear of funds that may run out, whether it's a reasonable fear or not, it's there. And so that can get in the way of using money to maximize one's life and to do what you want with the wealth you've accumulated, to enjoy it. And so we see that. We see a bit of guilt around wealth and its social implications. So as those folks that we work with, maybe are making wealth a first generation wealthy, or they come into an inheritance, and there's emotion tied to that as well. So all of those things we have to work through with clients to ultimately get to, what are your goals? What have you done so far to work towards those goals, and how can we help you work more efficiently, make the best decisions from an investment standpoint, from a financial planning standpoint, take advantage of tax strategies, and work through succession planning for and estate management for the legacy that may be for your family beyond the impact that your wealth has had for you.
Luke, any thoughts?
You know, I watched the Masters this weekend, and those that did got to see kind of this emotional back and forth victory with Rory McIlroy winning it. And I think of our place much like a caddy. Actually, right, I read an article after the match was done, and he said his caddy made a huge difference on the last hole. He calmed him down. He reset the context of the situation, made it not as stressful for him, and and advised him on the shot that he should take. Now it was up to him to take the shot, and he made it. But I think that we as advisors a lot of times find ourselves in that caddy position where we are saying, "Hey, we've seen this hole before, and you need to hit it right here. And we suggest this club to use because we've been there and done that and seen that with other clients." But as a caddy knows, they've got to play psychologist to their golfer as well. Somebody will be anxious. You got to calm them down. Somebody will be too calm. You got to rev them up a little bit. So we get to serve that role as an advisor.
One of the notes that I have here that you gave me really dovetails into that beautifully. It's the power of delegation and why smart investors work with financial advisors. I think that caddy analogy is just perfect. But talk a little bit more about that.
But we do have smart and successful clients that we work with. They've gotten to where they've gotten because they delegate some responsibility. So certainly, one way to benefit from that is to delegate some of the organization, some of the implementation for all of the moving parts of their financial life. And how do we save? How much do we need to save? Where do we save it? How do we grow it? Those sorts of things. And so that's where an advisor comes in. And there's a lot more to it than just that. But we are working with smart, successful people that just understand that they need some outside help. And when we're implementing our expertise, our help, our guidance to clients, we're working with clients that are by and large accumulating funds over time by doing a lot of the right things. So it's not as if that we have to start from scratch, but what we're trying to do is, maximize the resources that are there, the dollars that are being earned, and not just to accumulate a balance, but to have our clients live their best life. So we've seen examples kind of on both ends of the spectrum from a saver versus spender mentality. I have a client that came to us and had saved quite a bit of wealth, generational wealth, and they were very conservative in their approach to investing, which they could afford to be. They did not need to take significant wealth, but this couple they did not need to take significant risk, but this couple was in a good spot financially, but just very uncertain about what that would mean ultimately. In their mind, I think they kept mapping out worst case scenarios. What if there's a market crash? What if we have significant long-term care expenses, things like that? And really, none of those implications were going to disrupt their plan. Through the planning work that we do, we could map that out and show them, but it was just hard for them to grasp the fact that all of this wealth that they've accumulated was there for them to be able to spend, to enjoy. And so a big part of our discussion every meeting was encouraging them and celebrating with them when they did spend, but encouraging them to use their resources, to enjoy life, to take that vacation they've always talked about, even if it, sounded even if it sounded a bit more expensive than they were wanting to spend, something that they weren't used to doing. We encourage them to do so, and it wasn't to, you know, buy a bunch of things, but to have experiences and make memories and use your resources comfortably for that. So I think ultimately the greatest takeaway we gave them was the peace of mind that they had done the hard work. Their plan looked great and they could enjoy their wealth.
And I think that the process that we go through builds confidence in the client and allows them to see what's possible. So they have to have the dream first, but then we can put a number around it and say, not only can you do that, you can do this. So I've seen that come through in charitable planning. I have clients that have sold businesses, and in the year that you sell a business, you have a very high income tax rate. So significant charitable contribution can be very helpful. So a lot of people that have accumulated wealth did so, as Zach said, very smartly, and they were conservative in what they did, and they spent less than what they made. So the idea of actually making a big gift or spending a little more on something is really uncomfortable. That goes against everything that they did to kind of get to this point. But when we can show them through the math how you can give away $500,000 and still be just fine, and all your kids are going to be just fine, and you guys are going to continue to live the way you want to live, it's a real fun thing because people say, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea." I'm not sure how I'm not sure how I feel about that. I need to go home and think about it. And they have a conversation. We keep the conversation going, and then ultimately we decide to either do it or not do it. Or it's, thanks for letting us know we had that flexibility, but we're going to do something different. Or yeah, let's do that. We've always thought we would be interested in significant charitable giving at some point. We didn't realize that point was here. So let's go.
So you show them opportunities that they might have no idea about.
Exactly.
Sure, and I think we see clients that understand or embrace that there's going to be money left behind for generational wealth or for charitable purposes, and are comfortable with that, and that's part of the plan. But we also want to talk through, well, what's more important to you long term? Just leaving that money to your family or to charity, or to being able to do it with a warm hand while you're still living and see the good that comes from the charitable gift that you make, the support that you provide to, the charity of your choice, or to be able to do some family gifting with kids or grandkids, or also just enjoy, family vacations that are meaningful and again give you those lasting memories. So leveraging wealth, while you're here and able to do it is really an important thing to do. And it's not that you can plan to die with zero, right? The timing of that just doesn't quite work out so well. You don't know exactly how long you have. And so you have to be resourceful and thoughtful about the future and the long term and make sure that you're not going to outlive your wealth. But you can't, you know, plan for the future and look right past today. You got to stay in the present too and enjoy the wealth along the way. So that's a fun thing that we get to do with our clients to encourage that sort of thing. On the flip side, sometimes there are those that are doing very well financially, but they look at their wealth as something that they can spend now and benefit from, and maybe making purchases that aren't quite sustainable. So there's a give and take to both ways to look at it, and you have to make sure that the dollars that you're spending now to enjoy and to maximize your life are not more than you can sustainably do, not more than you can afford to spend in the near term, and making sure that you're saving plenty to have long term. And so, working with clients, just thinking through their their goals and what they're trying to accomplish is, it's a fun process. It's one where we take a really deep dive, and it's where strong relationships are built. And I think those relationships are the ones where we add the most value.
How do you help them in volatile markets?
I think that going back to the caddy example, we'd say we've not seen this exactly like this before, as the market's been a little volatile recently, but we have seen a lot of volatile markets in our career. And we can tell you how the story plays out. Something creates a lot of volatility, and ultimately it gets resolved and the market goes back up. So I think people, once they have the opportunity to talk with an advisor that has been there and done that, they have a greater comfort that they're going to be okay. And this can work without alteration. If we do need to alter it a little bit, there is some psychology that says make a small change. It, allow people to do something a little bit around the edges, so they like they have a sense of control in what can feel like an uncontrollable environment. So we work through all those different things with different people. Some people need that accommodation. Some people don't. They just need a conversation. So that just goes to the uniqueness of each person and each person's background and what they bring to the situation.
And I mentioned money being tied to emotion. It very much is. And certainly seeing your money go down in value in a bad market can bring about quite a bit of emotion. And so working with an investment manager and a financial planner to first prepare you with a diversified portfolio, to map out your savings strategy so that you know you're accumulating the amount of wealth that you need to meet your goals, and then put your investments in a diversified portfolio so that not everything's moving up, down, left, right at the same exact time, meaning that if the stock market pulls back in a significant way, there's assets in other types of investments that are holding up better, and you're not fully exposed to the wild whipsaws that we can see from time to time with the markets. But the short-term volatility from investing in the stock market is the fee that is paid for the long-term returns. I love sharing that statement because it's true. You got to be willing to stay the course in the face of some market volatility. And so we work with clients, we educate them, we try to prepare them up front by setting expectations appropriately. And then we rebalance along the way because a cheaper stock market, one that's gone down in value, historically has always been a buying opportunity. And of course, if we're doing that on a consistent, regular basis, no matter what the markets throw at us over the long haul, clients are going to be in good shape. And having the right mix of investments along the way, more growth oriented early on, a little more conservative and income generating later on, especially as you come up on the years of needing to take those funds out of your portfolio. If most of your expenses can be covered by the income being generated from the portfolio, you're in great shape. So those are all the things that we think about in trying to work through investments, work through financial independence analysis, and all the things we do on the planning side with clients, while not discounting their emotions, but embracing the fact that people do have significant emotional ties to their finances, just making sure that we have them look at it in a healthy way.
I also say that we can help people set up their situations where they can tolerate more risk or won't feel risk as much. So, as an example of that is, um, we had a client back through the great financial crisis. This person he was the head of a company. So we were going through a recession back then. So he had to fire some people at work, which was terribly stressful for him because he really liked everybody that he worked with and they were a great company, but they just had to change to meet the economic situation. And he also had some problems at home. He had some health concerns with one of his family members. So these were two stress points in addition to a falling stock market that really pressurized his situation. And he had a pretty large mortgage. So they were feeling free to spend in times when times were good, but they got a little overextended. Um, and that was also a pressure point. So we helped them work through that, control the things we could control. We paid off some of the mortgage. Uh, they felt better about that. They could withstand some of the volatility that the market had to offer. So um, you can create a more pressurized situation or a less pressurized situation with a good advisor, and they can get you ready for the hard times before they get here, hopefully, and then you won't have to make significant adjustments. And hopefully, we've gotten it just right that you can uh, not be bothered by the volatility in the market and make the money that you need to make on your investments in order to retire or achieve financial independence.
Well, before we wrap up, is there anything we have not touched on that you think we should? You covered a lot of ground here.
I think that just to recap the main points, a money mindset is developed over time, a lot of it from upbringing, a lot of it from influences along the way. And there's no right or wrong money mindset necessarily. It's just about understanding the way that you think about wealth and seeking out ways to grow your wealth, maybe with that mindset or in spite of that mindset. And so whether you're growth oriented, ultra conservative, a generational wealth builder, or a lifestyle maximizer, as we pointed those money mindsets out, engaging with an advisor and working through the steps to make sure that you're accumulating wealth and growing wealth to meet your long-term needs, and doing so with an understanding of how your emotions play into it. Engaging in a way that will not ignore those emotions, but uh, understand those emotions and that they're normal, and figure out how to work through them with the guidance of an advisor to, have a successful plan.
And if someone should want to speak to either of you or someone else at Foster and Motley, how can they do that?
Probably the best first step is to look at our website. That's fosterandmotley.com. We have a lot of good information on there about the kinds of things that we do and the kinds of people that we can help and the services that we can provide. So make that your first stop, learn a little bit more about us. And if it looks like that we might be a good fit for you and your family, let us know.
Find out your own money mindset. Talk to Luke, talk to Zach, and the other folks at Foster and Motley. And be sure to follow this podcast, share it with others as well. We value your time. Thanks for being with us.